Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for attending today's Yeshiva University Conference for World of Tomorrow. My name is Beth Gorin. I work in our Department of Institutional Advancement Department. I just wanted to introduce the panel. Dean Strauss, who is the Dean of our business school, Syms School of Business, is going to be leading the panel today. And he is in charge of our Career Center and Officer of Register as well. So I'm going to turn it over to Dean Strauss. Thank you again for coming.
Thank you, Beth. Beth is, by the way, the Senior Director of Institutional Advancement, a very, very close friend of Syms, works very closely with me and the Board of Overseers in running the school. So welcome, everyone. I hope all of you enjoyed as much as I did Rabbi Sachs's, presentation or response to the question this morning. He's just phenomenal. So as you heard this morning, today is a continuation of what started about 3-4 weeks ago when we had the investiture and when Rabbi Dr. Berman at the end of the day so eloquently presented a very inspiring presentation about his vision of Yeshiva University and the world of the future. And today we have 22 sessions, 7 concurrent this time, 5 later, and they all evolve around 4 themes that he outlined and that you heard this morning. Education in the world of tomorrow, values in the world of tomorrow, the marketplace in the world of tomorrow, and what we all hear this morning, leadership in the world of tomorrow. So what are the leadership skills that the leaders of tomorrow will require and will need to really run the businesses in the changing environment? We all hear about all of the things that are changing in the world of business. We're fortunate enough to have 3 leaders in different businesses that joined us this morning. I'd like to introduce them, and then what I'm going to do is I will ask a few questions. The reason I asked you to come down here is that I want this to be an interactive session. They will respectively answer some of the questions. If you have any comments, you agree, disagree, challenges, please, or your own questions, please jump in at any time. So I need to put my glasses on. So first, on my right is Sara Hofstetter. Sara is the CEO of a firm called 360i, which was recently named an Ad Age, which, by the way, is the industry magazine, A-list agency standout in creativity innovators. The success builds on years of distinguished agency recognitions, including being named Best Place to Work by Advertising Age in Cranes, New York. Sara actually graduated from Central High School. Since she joined 360i back in 2005, has created and consistently evolved the agency's capabilities, helping brands such as Oreo, HBO, Spotify, Nestle, and on, customers and drive strong business results. She is currently sits on several boards. I can name about 5 or 6 boards. Previously, she served as 360's president and senior vice president of brand strategy and emerging media. Prior to joining 360i, she was president and founder of Kayak Communications, a marketing agency which is focused on developing brand strategy and communications plans for new media brands. Before starting her own agency, Sara spent 10 years at Net2Phone, one of the world's first providers of voice-over internet technology. She lives in Long Island with a husband and 2 children. To her right is a good friend and a colleague, Laizer Kornwasser. Laizer, and I'm going from present back, is currently clinical professor of management. He teaches 2 courses. One is an entrepreneurial leadership course to our honor students, and the second one is managing a growing business, which primarily focuses on real estate. He teaches at the Syms School of Business. Prior to joining Yeshiva University faculty, he spent 18 years as an investment banker and for Fortune 50 companies. He has an MBA from Harvard Business School, BS in accounting from Yeshiva University, Syms School of Business. He's a member of Yeshiva University's Board of Trustees. He's also a member of the Syms School Board of Overseers. He's a member of Yeshiva University's High School, Rosenbaum Yeshiva of North Jersey Board, and OHEL Children's Home and Family Services Board of Directors. And all the way to the right, my good friend, Bruce Taragan. Bruce is the managing director for Blumberg Capital. He actually is one of the founders of Blumberg Capital, an extremely large VC, investing 25% of their money in Israeli startup companies. He has more than 25 years' experience as a venture capital investor, entrepreneur, technology investment banker, and corporate attorney. Prior to joining Blumberg, Bruce co-founded and held several senior management positions within technology companies, including Charles River Computers. Bruce also structured and managed early-stage technology transactions at Hamcrest and Quist, Mayer Brown and Platt, and Bankers Trust. He's a native New Yorker, lives on the Upper East Side, right? I think. East Side, earned his BA in Finance and Communications, cum laude from Yeshiva University, and his MBA and JD from Fordham University. He serves as a member of the Board of Observers and Board of Directors of way too many companies for me to mention. So I am delighted. I'm delighted to have the three of you here. Very quickly, my background is I spent about 40 years in corporate America and in business, 20 of those years in corporate America, some senior executive position at American Express, and subsequently did a few deals with some private equity groups. And before I joined Yeshiva University, I had my own small consulting company that focused on entrepreneurs. So with that, let's start the questioning. Whoever wants to take it first. The first question, what are the qualities and experiences that will shape the business leaders of the future of tomorrow? Who wants to take it first?
I'll start.
Okay.
I think probably the most important thing for people to think about is the understanding that, and I think a lot of people learn this in yeshiva, but you don't necessarily apply it in work, which is standing still is going backwards. That's why you kind of keep learning the same things over and over again when you're in school. You know, you take another look at it and you figure out how to adapt. And we are in an environment, whether that's through technology, the political ecosystem, or whatnot, where the requirement for constant learning and evolution is the only way you're going to be able to stay relevant. You know, Lord Sachs was talking about Facebook and its effect on the world and the world's community, the idea of distance learning, things like that. And so one of the things that helps people and people, companies, businesses, and whatnot capitalize on change is in that opportunity to really embrace it. And probably the most important skill you need for that would be grit, because you need a tremendous amount of resiliency in order to be able to advance. And the second one is really curiosity. There's so much out there in the world, and the people suffer from the whole idea of you don't know what you don't know. You have to be comfortable getting uncomfortable with those kinds of environments and making yourself vulnerable and being comfortable saying, I don't know enough about this, help me learn. And I think those are probably the biggest skills, which is just being a little bit vulnerable to be curious, and then having that grit and resiliency to advance from there.
I would just add at least one more, which is the ability to make decisions with imperfect data.
Yes.
And that's a skill whether you will never have perfect information. And I believe, and I'm sure plenty would prove me wrong, that if you strive for perfect information, by the time you have it, the decision is irrelevant. So being able to feel comfortable, understand that you are not the expert in everything, but can turn to experts for advice. But the ability to take whatever data you have, to synthesize it, and then to be able to make the best decision that affords you at the time is a skill that I think, regardless of where technology takes us, where industries take us, I think that's an extremely important skill as well.
And adding to that is being willing to make a decision and accept the fact that it's going to be a wrong decision, and being able to raise your hand and say, yes, I made a wrong decision, hopefully learn from the wrong decision so you don't make the same decision again.
So
Bruce?
I would agree with Sara, Laizer, and Michael, your comments. Maybe two things I would add. And I spent the last 20 years living and working in Silicon Valley, and maybe Silicon Valley, to speak for what Laizer just said, is really MVP, having a minimum viable product. And at the end of the day, when we meet with entrepreneurs and engineers that are building a product, it's never perfect. It's all about putting that product into the market as quickly as possible. It's a minimum viable product, and it's about iteration. Lord Sachs talked about Facebook, and what Facebook does is they call this in engineering and technology A/B testing, where they constantly iterate. And so what we encourage our entrepreneurs to do is really fail cheap, fail fast. And so you're going to make mistakes, it's fine. But I think the ability to iterate is really important. Second point I would add really as a comment, probably about a month or two ago, I was here in New York for a technology event, and I think it was the CIO or CTO for the state of New York who commented, and I think this is interesting and challenging. I'm curious, how many of you are any of you in the room like still in Yeshiva University or in? Okay, so first of all, I applaud that you're here on Sunday morning, because I'm sure in your day I was sleeping in and definitely not going to any conferences to hear about the future of anything.
They had no choice.
So they're
No, I'm just
still
kidding.
they actually came. That's impressive. So I think what's daunting as I think about it is statistically, I think 65% of all jobs that are there over the next decade by 2025 are going to be replaced by artificial intelligence, which Rabbi Sachs touched on, and I guess the YU Ideation website may touch on. 65% are going to be replaced by robots and artificial intelligence. The expectation is that about 40% of the Fortune 500 companies will not exist in a decade. They will be replaced by new, different technology companies. And if you think about Amazon, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, so many of these companies that have come, to the fore and are really turning, businesses in a completely different direction. And then actually a third of all jobs that are going to exist and be created for those of us, my youngest son is, just bar mitzvah, in 7th grade. Really a third of all jobs that are going to be relevant to kids in middle school don't exist today. So when you ask that question about the future, it's just so difficult to even venture a guess because none of us really know. And it's just thinking about, Sara touched on what's sort of tried and true in terms of, grit, work ethic and sticking with what we know and absolutely being curious to try to, get out of your daladamot, your comfort zone and explore and learn, other things. And so many of us have never ventured west of the Mississippi, but, seeing what's going on in Silicon Valley or in Silicon Valley, in Israel. I was there last week. I'm actually heading to Silicon Valley this week, and I'm back in Israel in a couple of weeks, down the road. So it's really getting out of our comfort zones and exploring, what's new and thinking about that, because we live in such a dynamic environment today versus, what existed decades ago. I mean, when I think about my dad and my grandfather, my grandfather's job doesn't exist today. It's been automated. And, most of our parents probably had the same job for 25 to 50 years. And an average tenure now of a CIO and a CEO and a CMO is probably closer to 2 years. And that's actually pretty impressive. So there's just so much more dynamism going throughout, the organization and what we have to think through as we move out and venture out for some of us that are, really just in the nascent stages of thinking about our career paths as we come out of, Yeshiva University, undergrad, graduate, et cetera.
I think there's something to build on what you're saying, which is the idea that your career doesn't have to be forever, right? And the way that maybe our parents were, certainly my parents were, you went, you got your degree, you maybe got an advanced degree, you did whatever you did, and you did it until you retired. You can pivot your career, whether the job is maybe not available anymore because it's been automated, which is, of course, this doomsday-like environment, which we do it all the time. I have 1,000 employees. I wish I had fewer. People are my biggest opportunity and my biggest problem. I'm dealing more with HR issues than I am dealing with technology issues, so I'd rather have technology where I can. But that all being said, I think from a people perspective, the more you bring that curiosity to the table, the more you're going to learn about where the world is going and then how you best prepare for it. My husband was a writer, and at the ripe age of 33, he's like, I don't think I want to do this for the rest of my life. What am I going to do? And I said, you're going to change careers. What? I'm 33. I'm so old. I can't do this. I'm like, are you kidding me? You're 33. You have so much opportunity. And so he continued to be a writer. He went back to school And he got a degree in education, and now he teaches at Yeshiva Flatbush. Could not be happier. Could not be happier. I started out, I was in public relations. I pivoted a couple of different times. I'm running an advertising agency. It's all in marketing communications, but it's not necessarily a direct path at all. I think you have to kind of see where the marketplace is going and say, okay, public relations is kind of interesting. It's about making people think that something is so important that somebody else should start talking about it. Is that not the same thing as social media, right? So pivoting from PR to social media wasn't the biggest pivot for me, but pivoting from social media to broader advertising, it became more natural as earned media got there. So you kind of have to see the opportunity and then figure out how do you start navigating your own path when it may not necessarily be as immediately viable.
And I would follow up, Sarah, your point. I mean, it's interesting to hear Sarah say like, your husband can't be any happier. And I remember, as if it was yesterday, it was probably 1995. I was working at a big, Park Avenue law firm, coming out of law school, business school, making a lot of money. And I called up my parents and I said to them, I'm quitting my job and, I'm just not happy. And they're like, what does that mean? Like, what do you mean you're not happy? You make a lot of money, you're working on Park Avenue, like, suck it up. Like, that's great. and it's just...
Like a good Jewish parent.
Right.
Yeah, it's surprising. They were disappointed I didn't go to med school, but, thank God I had two brothers that did that. But, so I think it's really interesting perspective for those of you that are, like, in your undergrad or going to graduate schools. The world is your oyster. In spite of the doom and gloom of automation and, see that, turn that on its head. There's going to be a whole new slew of jobs that are going to be created, and there's tons of opportunity. And it's not just about, like, when you spend time in Silicon Valley, they're not interested in just getting a job coming out of, Stanford and MIT and Wharton and all these great schools, that are going out there for engineering jobs. They're like, well, what am I building? Is it worthwhile? Is it meaningful? Does it have a social impact? Where's the double bottom line? And so I think this happiness quotient is very present and it really is able to come to fruition. And, listen, I iterated, I pivoted, and it took some time to kind of, get to where I'm at today. But I think, my words of encouragement would be like, be patient, be selective, and be happy. Life is really short, and you don't want to be like, have golden handcuffs, working in a job that you're miserable, working there, even if you're making a lot of money. Life is too short. And I really think that, kind of there's a pshat and a drash. The simple interpretation is, that if you do what you love, the money will follow. Maybe it's secondary, maybe it's tertiary over the course of your life. But maybe the drash, the real deeper interpretation is that if you really do what you love, the money will follow. Because you're going to, I was not a great lawyer, frankly. I didn't love being a lawyer. My heart, my passion wasn't there. And, if you do something that you really, are passionate about, I know like Jack Welch has this book going back, like Inside the Gut, where he talks about, all the different elements that go into being a great CEO, and then all of that he wraps in with passion. He's like, there needs to be passion. And absolutely. I can tell you as someone who's looked at probably 30,000 companies that come visit us for funding, that's sort of that, it's a pattern recognition. It's not a quantifiable, it's not like a degree, and it's not, maybe some of their experiences, but it's where you really believe like somehow, some way this entrepreneur is going to find a way. Mark Andreessen from Netscape talks about entrepreneurs just breaking through brick walls and doing the impossible. And I think that's what we look for, and that's what each of you, as you're pivoting through your careers or as you're coming out of school, think about. Not just like, I need to get a job, I need to make a living and, pay my yeshiva tuition. It's thinking about like, hey, what do I want to do for the rest of my life that really excites me, and that, when I wake up every day, I pinch myself, and I love what I do, and that's really a privilege, to be in that position. And I think that today the world's changed. We're not coming out of the shtetl from Eastern Europe, and, Israel is probably the fourth most powerful army in the world, and, the world has really changed. And so I think that for each of us, it's thinking through like, yes, I want to be successful, but what does that mean? And the world is your oyster, and you can have it all. As maybe cliche as that sounds, but I think each of us can really strive to have it all.
Okay, no, just to pick up on him, and Lawrence, I'll give you in a minute. So my capacity as a dean, kids come in every day, what should I major in? What should I major in? They're worried about, they hear 2 weeks, what should I major in? They're only concerned about majoring. Of course, you have to, at some point, you have to find your major in school. But I keep telling them, and I just, about 6 months ago, I read a survey, which are constantly, they're doing surveys almost every year, universities, because they want to determine, is there any correlation between what students major at university and what they wind up doing. And this latest one is they picked 1,500 people, 500 that have been out of school 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, and a whole slew of questions. And the bottom line is there was zero correlation between what they majored and what they wound up. And, quite frankly, it's not shocking to many of us, certainly to the people on dais, because how many people go to law school, never, never lawyers? Here's somebody who's went to accounting school, Joel Strauss. He never did accounting a day in his life. And so do what you enjoy doing, and the point is you're gonna fit into your slot at some point.
But I guess the only thing I would just add, which is
Sure.
to this point of learning, and like you said, most people when they graduate, and if you look back 20, 30 years later to see, did they follow that path?
Right.
99% of the people didn't follow the path, and if they happen to have followed that path, got there in a way that they totally didn't expect. So I would just underscore you have to be constantly learning. And if you're staying still, you're falling behind. So you need to constantly be learning. Every day when you wake up, every job, you need to find a way to learn something and further your brand, your knowledge, because at the end of the day, otherwise you'll miss those opportunities for pivot. And then underscore the whole thing of passion, because if you're not passionate about something, there's no way you can lead.
Absolutely.
And so you really need to find something that gets you out of bed, that gets you excited. And that could be a bunch of things, right? And that could be in the workforce, that could be in your nonprofit and other things that you do. But that if you're gonna want to lead and get other people to trust you and to follow you, you need to have that passion. Otherwise, there's no way your employees will.
Agree. Lawrence, you wanted to say something.
Yeah, actually, follow up on the question. Each of you gave your own impressions and elaborated on it, and then you chose to speak to students either here or theoretical students. I'd like you to talk to the university as an institution about what should the university do in terms of building the knowledge and skills. How is this institution?
It's good. It's question number 2, but go ahead. No,
It's like a peek.
that's excellent. Go ahead.
I mean, there are two parts to this, and as a marketer, there's talking to the university about what the university should do and then how the university positions itself. So there are two different components to it. So I'm going to start with the second one, and then these guys can talk to either one. But the second one is the positioning. So one of the things is it's that Yeshiva University has phenomenal talent, but it often gets pigeonholed. And so that also, there becomes this cascading effect. I think you go back to what Yeshiva University is known for in terms of the kinds of students that it brings out, but also the kind of focus that the school has. One of the things that I've had my eyes open to over the past year or two, thanks to a lot of the folks actually in this room, is a lot more about the rigor of the school, the dynamicism, and the diversity of skills and talent and faculty that is coming out of the school. And I feel like that's still, the perception is lagging the reality. And so I think it's great that we're doing this World of Tomorrow thing, because I think it's starting to change that perception. But the question is, how do you take a lot of the thought process of what Lord Sachs talked about how we stop talking in our echo chamber and start getting that conversation at a much broader level, so that when I'm doing recruiting at the most junior level, at the most senior level, I see Yeshiva University on a resume and I get excited, because I'm getting excited by we talked a lot about passion. We get excited about the passion,
Right.
about what people are bringing. But frankly, I mean, one of the things that I always say when I see a kid coming out of YU, because I have a frame of reference, is they just went through dual curriculum their whole freaking lives, in which case at this point, work is a piece of cake, right? Like I didn't go to YU, I went to Queens College. I slept through college and I graduated summa cum laude. Why? Because I went to yeshiva my whole life. It was so freaking easy. It was a no-brainer. So when you see a kid that has worked that hard, that went through the combination of the dual curriculum and the rigor, and then you talk about the up-level quality, like that's a message that has to get out much more broadly than the YU community. So for me, that becomes a very big part of, I think, what the university needs to do. Not necessarily what it needs to do from the inside, but how you get whatever you're doing from the inside to the inside out.
So Lawrence, I know this is a topic that I'm passionate about, and being over the last 2 years before I started teaching, thinking about how do we want somebody to graduate YU versus how was YU like when I graduated? And how would I want the classes to be? If I were to rewrite my education, how would I rewrite it? And I'm a big fan of experiential learning, right? If it was up to me, I think 75% of the classes should not have textbooks. Okay, now, I'm sure plenty of people would disagree with me. But I believe there are certain things that you should lecture. But in today's day and age, so the way I structure my class is a third of my class, I get CEOs, some who are successful, some who weren't, so the students can see what the real world is like and learn from other people. Don't just learn from me, but learn from the experiences that other people have. And listen, everyone will take from different people's perspectives, goods and bads, and everyone will look at it from different lenses. But that's one thing. How do they define success? How did they get to how did they get to, and what was the journey they took? The second thing is, I'm a big believer, and like I said, is trying to make decisions with imperfect data. The best way I believe to do that is with case studies. Now, some of the students hate it when I do it, some people like it, but when we get into a dialogue, I will push a student 2 or 3 times, even to the point where they cringe a little bit. And I don't do that to make them feel uncomfortable. I try to put them in the shoes of what is the real business world like, because I think that's our role, is to get them ready for that. And so to me, it's all about experiencing what the real world is like within the YU cocoon. I would love it if we can bring in more internships that are sort of monitored by professors. But to me, it's not about the textbook. It's about the experiences and the thought process that defines that education.
And we are doing it more and more, just by the way. Yes, Lenny?
Hi. I come from this kind of world as well, but I've also learned that some of the best decision makers have a balance.
Just speak up a little bit, Lenny.
Some of the best decision makers have a balance in their life. They have a life outside of work that broadens them so that when the time comes to make decisions in the workplace, they're able to do it better than most. The work is very addictive. It's a pleasure, as you pointed out. It's exciting. Enormous satisfaction. That gets you addicted sometimes. It doesn't make you the best decision maker. What do you do outside of work that makes you the person you are?
So, I mean, I guess just a very quick, maybe holistic perspective, Lawrence, to your comment. I would say holistically, first off, Laizer, I would love to take your class. It sounds really interesting. And secondly, I would say that technology needs to be really infused in so many different ways into Yeshiva University's DNA and operating system. The fact that when I graduated Yeshiva University in 1989, I'm 35, don't be misled by the year that I graduated, but probably 95% of the students were either pre-law or going to med school, accounting. Again, I mean, let's get people out. There's a whole world outside in Silicon Valley that I hadn't been exposed to, that most of the students here might not be and are starting to get exposed to, and it's really changing the world as we know it. So I think that that's super important. Now, so that's just sort of briefly, commenting, Lawrence, on your question. You're right. I think it's really challenging. In my opinion, probably the greatest challenge in life for me is balance. It's finding that balance between work and life. Having 3 kids, trying to, I guess I can't use the term modern orthodoxy after
This morning, right?
comments, but trying to maintain that balance and Jewish identity. And I'd say that's actually, I've lectured at universities across the world and the country, and when I go out there, I ask students, and these are maybe a small percentage are Jewish with no identification of being Jewish for the most part, and more than 50% of companies that are funded in Silicon Valley are immigrants. So it's really just an incredible mix of people that you're running across at some of these places. So I ask them to raise hands and say, how many of you have actually turned your device off? You're so connected to your device, for a 24-hour period. How many of you have been to Israel? Just, we're all technology focused on Silicon Valley. I'm obviously a Zionist promoting Israel. We're one of the most active investors in Israel. I'm there every month pretty much, and we have an office there, etc. And I really want to encourage, pro-Israel. I mean, it's amazing. I mean, really sad and amazing how there's such negative sentiment, towards Israel just out of ignorance. I think we need to, Sarah, we could probably use some of your skills on the marketing side to really figure that out, because we need marketing to changed perception. But I guess I'm digressing a little bit, but I think it's about encouraging balance. Like, my kids struggle with like shutting down. To me, I ask my kids on Shabbos, like, what do you think is the greatest technology invention of all time? And they're like, oh, the iPhone, or, to me it's Shabbos. I mean, it really is. Like, to be able to shut off, it's such an incredible blessing. So I think having that balance, and it goes back to, I remember when I was working at a big law firm, and I was working for an Asian partner on a Supreme Court brief, and it was Friday afternoon, and I turned to her and said, hey, I'm out of here, it's getting late. And she was like new to the firm, and she's like, what do you mean you're out of here? I'm like, well, it's Shabbat, whatever, it's the Sabbath, and I gotta leave. And she's like, you're joking, right? I'm like, no, I'm leaving. I'm like, I'll be back tomorrow night, no problem. I'll be back Saturday night, I'll be back Sunday, no problem. She's like, it's a Supreme Court brief. I'm like, I don't really care. I answer to a higher authority type of thing. And so it was that, and similarly, it was living in Silicon Valley where, very candidly, between us, the Jews are in the closet, the gays are out of the closet, and the Jews are in the closet. I have an Israeli flag, an American flag on my home in California when I was living there for 20 years. And, I was very outspoken about my Jewish perspective and Zionism, etc. And, I got blasted a bunch of times. I don't really care. Like, I talked to some of the Jewish investors and I was like, hey, why don't we, go and attack some of the commentary that some of these guys are saying about Jews, about Israel. And they're like, well, no, he's not going to send me this next deal. I'm like, really? Like, that's what you're worried about getting? And I don't know, maybe I'm stupid. I mean, he invested in Airbnb and made $1 billion, so maybe I should have, shut my mouth. But it's not my personality. And I think we need to advocate. So I think it's about finding balance, and it's, when it comes down to it, at the end of the day, what Yeshiva University has done and provided for me is so unique and differentiated. I'm hanging out with people from Harvard, MIT, and Stanford, and Wharton, and A, the network at Yeshiva University is better, in my opinion.
Absolutely.
And then B, the values that you have to really, again, they're in our DNA and our operating systems, and you're reading, in the news about Harvey Weinstein and all these, every day it's something else. But if our Yeshiva University graduates can maintain the ethos, the ethics, really, the value of balance, of Torah Umada, and my team knows, like, I'm out, I'm on boards with guys from India, and they don't know what the hell Sukkot is. All they know is, like, I'm out the first 2 days and the last 2 days for board meetings invariably, and we were in the middle of really large transactions, and I'm just like, I'm out. Yesterday afternoon, Friday, I was dealing with a major issue, and, literally, I'm like, the CEO's like, I'll call you back in an hour. I'm like, no, you won't. Like, I'm off the grid and done, and I'll talk to you tomorrow night. And so it's just having that balance, and then hopefully as a role model, communicating that to our children, and in the workplace. It's, the people that work in my firm, many of them they're not Jewish, whatever, it doesn't really matter, but a sense of like, hey, family comes first, there needs to be a balance. It's really, really hard. And I would just encourage people as we go out there, again, as you're starting many of you are starting your journeys, in your careers, don't compromise your integrity, and be transparent and really, maintain that balance. Otherwise, it gets so difficult to, kind of claw back and change. And you're right. I mean, I love what I do, but at the same time,
20 minutes.
I also love being a dad. I love being a husband, and I love going to shul Friday night. And so, you have to, maintain that balance, and it's really, really difficult. And you're going to, whether I was in Japan trying to explain in Japanese how to have like a kosher meal, which was actually impossible, and I got food poisoning. That's the truth. Or in Dubai, where we were meeting with investors that basically, my partner was like, well, let's hide the Israel stuff. And I'm like, you know what? I'm going home. I don't want to hide the Israel stuff. I don't need to be meeting with this Saudi, clan that basically were behind 9/11. And if it means we lose $1 billion, so be it. So, there are going to be some challenges throughout your careers, and each of us have to sort of hopefully show our mettle and stay strong to what Yeshiva University, I think, imbues in us from the time I was in high school here and college here, and maintaining that identity is just so quintessential.
So Lenny, can I just add one thing to what Lenny said?
This lady was very patient, but go ahead.
Just really quickly, two things I would just add. One is defining success is extremely important. And that is, you don't define success, or at least what I teach my students and the way I've lived my life is, you don't necessarily, a good leader, or all of us here, don't define success by what's in the bank account. Everyone has their own views of what success is, and constantly go back and say, are you reaching success? Success in family, success with the community, success in work. And I would tell you, one of the, a great article is by a professor of mine, Clayton Christensen, on measuring your life. I would tell everybody to read it and go back and read it every year. It's fantastic and it's worth reading. And the second thing, which actually Clayton Christensen told me at the end of my first semester, was wherever you draw the line in the sand. And I tell this to students,
right.
If you cross that line, it's very hard to redraw it in the same place. And I tell students, when you go out in the workforce, it's easy for us and for me to bring CEOs in to tell you work-life balance, work-life balance. It's a lot harder when you go out into the workforce and you're a junior person and you're trying to prove yourself. It's really hard and you struggle with, you may not have the financial whereabouts, you're dealing with trying to prove yourself when everyone else around you is doing 10 times more. The key thing you just really need to remember is you will draw the line in the sand wherever you feel comfortable, but you have to understand, once you step over that line, it's very hard to go back to it. So, defining success to me is the key, and including family and community is the only way you can get there.
I just wanted,
I'll turn it on.
I wanted to mention 3 points, I hope it's working, regarding going to Stern College, being an attorney, and being a professor, all of which were touched on by the group. First, as being a student at Stern College, I thought I knew what I wanted to be, and I am what I wanted to be. But I remember I was so focused on taking the requirements first and then the courses that I thought were going to help me in my major, that in the very last semester I was in Stern College, I took a COBOL class. Remember what COBOL was? It's a
Some of
software
us do.
programming class. And I said to myself, what a darn shame that I took it in my last semester, because that's something that I could have possibly been interested in going into. So now that my daughter is in Stern College, I'm trying to tell her that I think...
They don't offer that course anymore. No.
They don't, right, exactly. I'm trying to encourage her to try out the different classes, because I think what's great about college now is that there are such a grand number of courses. My mother was a second graduating class in Stern College, so she had like 5 majors. What was a nursing teacher, assistant teacher, I don't know, secretary, but it was bigger in my day, and now in my daughter's day, it's even larger. And I'm encouraging her to try classes that she may think are absolutely outside of her comfort level or desire to major in, just to get the experience and see if she likes it. As an attorney, I've been an attorney now for almost 30 years, I opted to set up my practice 6 blocks away from my home. And that allows me to put my kids on the bus and take them off the bus and go to their Hanukkah plays and Siddur plays. That means I have to wake up at 3:30 in the morning. And people say to me, well, how do you wake up 3:30 in the morning every morning and get your work done? And it's very simple. One answer, because I like what I do. So it's not a burden to me. I wake up at 3:30 in the morning. It means a lot to me that I learn. So I spend an hour learning Torah from 3:30 to 4:30. Then I get my writing done, because I own the community website. In the 5 towns, I get that writing done, I get my brief writing done, then I wake up my children, I get them on the bus, and I take them off the bus. And that's how I prioritize my life. And it's because if you choose to do what you like to do, then what it is, it doesn't matter what time you wake up to get it done, you're happy to get it done. That's part 2. Part 3, as a law professor, I decided, and it was a very big movement at the time that I started becoming a law professor, get those kids ready, get the students ready to have their own practice, because many of them may not get hired by attorneys. So I was teaching estate and gift taxation. I didn't really give them. I created my own textbook, but I really made them say, well, if you want a will, healthcare proxy, power of attorney, go draft it, and then share it with everybody on the blackboard. And then you comment on everybody else's. And I think that it's important in college, not in college, but maybe in college, I'd like to see them, students explore more different opportunities. And then in graduate school, I think it's really important that they focus on getting the students ready for the real world. And that means not coddling them and not giving them textbooks and not feeding them. They have the world at their fingertips now on their internet. Let them go out and make believe that they're attorneys. So
I'm going to say something that's probably going to get me in trouble, but that hasn't stopped me in the past. and to address your point, I think we do our children and our students an injustice by trying to cram an education into 3 years. And I understand why, and I understand the financial issues that we do it, but here's the result of it. And there's a broad impact that I don't think people understand.
Absolutely.
They don't have time for elective courses, but even more important, and I see this when I was hiring students and when I try to help students get jobs. You now are trying to cram a 4-year experience into 3. Their resumes are nowhere near where everyone else is because they really only have tried to get 1 good summer job when everyone else has 2. And if we can find some way where students have a 4-year education, where maybe 1 year is an internship or experiential that not only allows them to experience with other areas, but allows them to have a much better credential so that their education and their IQ can compete with anybody else out there. But we hold them back because on something that we try to fit into our own unique square or round peg, and it has a lot of ramifications. So, I mean, I hear that. Unfortunately, it's a victim of the recipe that the consumers want today, but I do believe it has broad ramifications.
Is there a thought that maybe, I went to Central and then to Stern, so I only went to 11th grade, and then I didn't do 12th grade, I went to Stern College. Is there a thought that maybe instead of having a 4-year high school, because many people are now going to Israel, that maybe make that 12th grade into the Israel year and then go back to the full 4 years?
Yeah, listen, I think the answers to that question is probably beyond this panel, but I think it's worth a conversation for everyone to think about is how do we get students with more time on campus rather than less so that when they graduate, they're ready for the real world? Because trust me, all the other students coming out of other colleges have spent 4 years getting ready for it, and we need to make sure our students are in the same place.
Absolutely.
Just lower tuition.
And I just want to add,
All in favor, say aye.
just one quick addition. Again, I speak to a lot of students, and whenever I have a chance to speak to them when they first come in, I emphasize that very point, that you're here to get an education, not only to get a job. And don't cram it into 3 years. And I experienced it myself when I first came in, before I took over Associate Dean. I taught a course at 6:30 at night, and I walked into the classroom, and within 2 seconds, literally 2 seconds, I could tell you who's taking the full load, which is 17 and a half credits, which you need to take every semester if you're going to finish in 3 years, because their eyes were red, and their heads were wiggling. They were just trying to be polite, not to fall asleep in class. And if you think through the rigor of having to cram 4 years in 3 years, they literally can't sleep more than, especially the men. The women are a little bit more luxury, but the men can sleep 4 hours at most because they're going from 7 o'clock in the morning until 8 o'clock at night, and then tonight Seder till 10, and then they socialize a little bit, then they do their homework, and they go to sleep 1, 2 o'clock to get up at 6 o'clock in the morning again. So we're doing them injustice. I agree with you, Laizer. Yes, Joe?
Just to echo on something that Laizer said, and some of you know that I work with and meet with 2, 3, 4 students or alumni a week, and your point about the internships and kids being exposed to opportunities that they would not ever think about when they're in the cocoon of YU is so incredibly important.
Absolutely.
The problem is, as we know, not only being here uptown in the Heights and having the double program, there's no opportunity for these kids to get out there and do internships. This program through New York State will hopefully open the door for some, but I think we got to think out of the box as a school and come up with a way that the students can do internships, at least at some point. Maybe it has to wait till the junior or senior year. Allow for them not to feel guilty that they're going to miss year. Set up a separate year. Make it more like it's going to be in the real world, where if you want to learn, you're going to have to set it a certain time during the day. But the university has to recognize the importance of getting our students out there and building a program where they can learn. So get up at 3:30 in the morning, maybe get up early, You need to have, some early morning share, and then take a semester where you can do an internship, where you can meet people that aren't like us. I tell kids all the time, you're going to get out there, you're going to be at the water cooler, you're going to be talking to some person that's maybe not Jewish, not from your background, and they're going to say, hey, my sister just started a job doing that, this or that, and you're going to say, wow, I didn't even know that's a job, that sounds so interesting. So we have to come up with some, I think we're on our way, but we have to come up
So
with
Joel,
some
there is
more-
Tamid. I don't know, it doesn't answer your question maybe broadly, but in technology, Tamid is a program on college campuses, and they have a whole program where kids get internships, and we have a bunch of our Israeli portfolio companies that have hired as interns a lot of these students to get some international technology work experience. So I think that's at least a sliver of a solution for it, and maybe there needs to be more broadly.
We need for
Sure.
YU
Yeah.
to make us part of the structure, as Laizer sort of suggested, where they're not going to feel guilty,
Yeah.
and it's going to be a real option that they can learn, get up really early, you learn from 7:30 to 8:30, and then you can for at least a semester you can go downtown and do an internship.
Well, I think there's something really to build on that, though, which is the fact that when you get out of YU, if you go to YU for undergrad, and certainly if you go for grad, the lack of exposure to the real world just gets harder and harder and harder. And when I graduated college, and Michael mentioned, I started working at Net2Phone, which was first IDT, then Net2Phone. Why did I work there? I didn't want to leave the bubble. I was petrified of having to leave early for Shabbos. I was petrified about having to deal with food issues. So I will tell you right now, I compromised and I took a job that I could have done a lot better for myself. And I took a job because it was safe, because I was working for a frum guy, and there was a kosher cafeteria, and I schlepped to Hackensack, New Jersey, specifically because it was a safer option for me. And you know what? It's not healthy. It was incredibly unhealthy, and frankly, not the best place for a woman. Let's just put that aside. But the idea of getting these kids exposure to the real world and learning how to do what Lord Sachs talked about, which is about shining a light and not splitting hairs about which sect of observant Judaism you are. The only way you're going to do that is if you are able to actually get out there and play that divide. So the gentleman in the back had asked the question about work-life balance and all that other stuff. What I do in my free time is I speak about this. I spoke at the Cannes Lions Festival of Creativity, where there was not a Jew in the audience, specifically about what it's like to be an observant Jew in the advertising business, where there's plenty of Jews running the media, and not a lot of people leaving early for Shabbos. Not a lot of people saying, oh, you got to come with me to Reserve Cut if we're going to go have dinner. Like, there's a very different way of operating, which allows you to tell the story of the beauty of Shabbos and the beauty of the idea of the digital detox. But you can't do that if you continue to create the bubble for yourself. So these internships are great for competitive advantage. It's great for being able to balance the Torah and Matzah that YU espouses. So to me, it's just so much more critical that if you're not going to have the luxury of being self-employed, and I say that in air quotes because I know Suri worked her tuchus off in order to get to where she is, but the idea of getting out into the corporate world, there's a requirement of integration of some sort and drawing the line, as Laizer said, but you can't do that without actually being prepared for that. So
I want to get back to the leadership. Thank you. One of our students has a question.
Hi, so yes, I'm a student here at Yeshiva University.
Why don't you stand up, please?
Third year here, everyone. So it's very interesting because I'm a member of Tamid, and I went this past summer to Israel through Tamid, through YU, and actually was able to hear Mr. Taragan speak. I also worked at IDT my first semester at YU. And I found actually like a lot of things that we're talking about actually really do exist. Like, I'm not here just as a ploy. I really do believe this. Is that when I went to my shir rebbe and I said like, hey, I got a really interesting internship and it's going to force me to miss shir once or twice a week. Can we make a time, let's say outside of shir, to learn? He said absolutely. So what did we do? I missed shir twice a week, but those 2 days in the evenings I was able to learn with my rebbe and able to keep up in shir. And I think like in terms of like kind of the approach to Israel, like Tamid was an opportunity that's offered to all YU students that I don't know if everyone takes upon, but we get about 75 applications a semester. So I mean, business school is 700 students, and we get 75 applications per semester, and the club's about 100 students. And this past year, we sent 11 kids over the summer to Israel. So, and they all worked in tech companies or in either high tech or VC or PE. And those are also incredible opportunities. So I think that like a lot of this is not just discussing it, and it actually does exist, but it's also encouraging students to take that extra step. Things don't just kind of come into your hands.
You know,
it's not just like labor.
This is amazing, and let me just say thank you for saying that, because I think what's really refreshing to me is that the energy, the ambition, and the drive that you're bringing, too much of it, you know, there's a sense of sort of magili, a sense of entitlement, I think, whether it's, you know, our kids coming out of MTA, Yeshiva University, and frankly, it's the kids that I see, a lot of the resumes coming from Stanford and top schools. They're like, they interview at my firm, like, oh, when can I be a partner? I want to travel business class. I'm like, really? Like, you know, how do you fly? It's like, seriously? Like, we were staying at Motel 6s and flying coach, you know, and really struggling and working for it. So I don't care what the future looks like at the end of the day, but it's frankly, it's people with your perspective that are going to thrive and succeed. And I guarantee you, you know, listen, so many of us, when I was in YU, I was junior class president, I was president of Syms School of Business, and I always made that extra effort. So at the end of the day, you know, it's about work ethic, it's about hunger, it's about, you know, creating those opportunities for yourself that you did, and you know, really, kol hakavod. I think it's amazing, you know, and you enriched from that. And we can compete with every top school in America, in my opinion. You know, the kids in Yeshiva University coming out that are willing to, you know, make some sacrifices, adapt, work hard. And, you know, it's not like, you know, no, it doesn't mean you could show up at 10 o'clock. You know, I'm trying to explain to my kids, like, oh, you gotta show up early. I mean, like, who was it? Gigi Hadid, like the famous actress. She's like, you know, be nice to people, show up early. You know, that's like what, she's like some famous supermodel, and that's what, like, her mom told her. And it's, you know, otherwise someone else will take your job. You know, we didn't have the influx 25 years ago that we're seeing today of, you know, immigrants from all over the world now that you're competing with. But I think that if we show that work ethic, if we work really hard, you know, the world is your oyster, and we can absolutely achieve. But, you know, you can't sit back and sort of be in that, you know, lean back mode. You have to be proactive. You have to attack the market. You know, I guarantee you no one gave really any of us anything, you know, for the most part. And maybe, you know, maybe your dad has a connection. It'll open a door. But you know what? It's going to get slammed in your face unless you demonstrate the incredible work ethic, drive, ambition, you know, transparency, integrity that you're touching on by, you know, all the things you've said. So really, I mean, it's amazing to hear that and encouraging, and I think we can compete at any level, but it takes that. And maybe a lot of people just, you know, everyone wants to be the CEO, everyone wants to, you know, be at the end game, but no one's willing to, you know, wake up at 3:30 in the morning and make those sacrifices and, you know, get on a plane every week. I mean, I'm flying a couple hours on another flight, you know, to work out to the West Coast, and you know, I've booked 150,000 miles this year, and it comes with sacrifice, and you still need to think about balance. And that's really the tension, I think, in life, is finding that work-life balance. But it's sacrifice. It's, you know, you're here Sunday morning and you're not out, you know, sleeping or playing video games or, you know, whatever it is other kids your age are doing. And I think that's the type of recipe for success in the long term.
So the only thing I would just add to the YU experience, which goes to Sarah's point of not doing a good job of marketing. So one of the things that I was invited to, and most people don't know about it, but Rav Neuberger and I did a chabura, and then other Rabbeim do a chabura with business leaders, where you actually come into the room, and YU students come in and they ask questions about how you integrate the business world with halacha, and you have a business person and a rabbi, so it's not just coming from a rabbi, it's coming, and very often in that conversation, Rabbi Neuberger said, don't turn to me, ask Laizer what the story is, and I said, listen, I'm not posking, but here's the real world. Here's how you deal with certain things, and then he would give his definitions that you can do in this cocoon, so to speak, to get ready.
Yeah, this lady been trying to, go ahead.
I'm Laura Vieras, so I'm actually a marketer. Sarah doesn't even know this, but I worked with her company years ago.
I do. Reckitt Benckiser, don't even start. I remember very well, ma'am.
That's not really my topic is, over the years, I've had some, like, YU has leveraged people like me in a spotty way, which I think is a, you know, untapped opportunity, not just me, but professionals. But one thing that I think was very valuable, and I don't know if it's still going on, but I participated in a session when I think it was mostly Syms students preparing to go on interviews. It was co-ed, and it was sort of warning about what to do in an interview and what to do in your internship. And my husband also just recently retired from Deloitte, and I know there's still this issue about work ethic and entitlement and things, because I know you have a lot of accounting graduates who are like, really, not everybody is as driven as the people in this room. That's what I really think.
So I want to give a shout out.
They're not going to stick with it as much. And a lot of things were happening during internships that didn't put such a good favor from a YU student point of view. And I wonder, is the school still dealing with that enough to help students understand when you go into the real world, what is your work ethic? What kind of career should you really be choosing, and how committed you are? And are you as driven as these three people on this panel? Because I think a lot of the students aren't, and they don't really want to maybe go that far. And you should be honest, because then you could be hurting YU's name. And I mean, I personally have hired a few students from YU, and some of them were terrific, and some of them were less than terrific. And that also is a problem. It could be a problem with consistency, or just work ethic, or the company spends 3 years training them, and then they say, this is not really for me, and then that creates resentment. So I don't mean to be negative, but I think part of YU's job is to helping honestly prepare students for what they're really going to face in the world, and where is the good matches, what really kind of career should
The answer is yes. Unfortunately, we have 2 minutes. The answer is yes. We have a career center that does it very, very well. But I just want to give a shout out to Joel Strauss, who's sitting right here, and one of the programs that he's been created and running for the last, 3, 4, 5 years, is being orthodox in a non-orthodox community.
The program is called Being Orthodox in the Unorthodox Workplace. And we've run it now for, this will be our 6th year. And we start off with a good speaker. Last year, you probably know, some people here in the room probably know Rachel Krause, Stern graduate, went on to get an MBA from NYU. She's the Vice President of Marketing for Westfield. So she was our guest speaker. It's a co-ed event, and I bring in alumni from every different field that you could imagine, and we do workshops for about an hour and a half. Co-ed, because that's what the workplace is, and we use a storyline to jumpstart discussions about all these issues that they're going to confront in the workplace. And then we have a networking reception afterwards. It's a program that we've been doing now for 6 years.
But you should know, the issue you're mentioning, I know people hear it and they think it's a YU issue, so I'll give you a very quick story and we're out of time. But 7 years ago, the company that I was at had a friends and family internship program where we paid them a lot of money. I mean, a lot of money for the summer. It was a lot of money. And any student that got that job, it was really to get him a first job on the resume. The person that was assigned to me comes into my office, and I say, here's what I'd like you to do for the summer. Okay? I wanted them to research a certain policy and how our business would be impacted by that policy. It's exactly what happens. This is not a YU student. And from one of the big Ivies, looks to me and says, I'm not interested. Now, in my right mind, I would have never have said that. I said, what do you mean you're not interested? She goes, that just doesn't get me excited. I said, okay, so do me a favor. Go take a half an hour, think about what gets you interested and what would add value to me so that this could be a good internship. She comes back and she says, I don't know. So I said, I'm going to give you another half an hour because I actually know who your father is. It's somebody that worked in the company, and I'm going to have to call them and say, your first job was 1 day, and not even a day because I'm going to have to let you go. And I said, listen, if you don't want to work for me or my division, that's fine, but tell me how you can add value. Anything. What are you passionate about? What do you like? She came back and she said, I don't know. And she worked for me for half a day. Okay, so I just want to be clear.
It sounds like she made a lot of money, though. Even more. It's not the worst. I want that job.
She did not get one paycheck. And so just so you should know, it's not just a YU thing. And yes, it's an issue that everyone has to deal with, and it's a change in culture. But it's just not a YU thing. And I would tell you, whatever YU does today, everyone can improve and do a better job at it.
It's definitely not endemic.
So unfortunately, we not only ran out of time.
What? The student had a question. Maybe just give him a chance.
Who?
You had
okay.
A student?
Yeah, hi.
Because we're way over time. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm not a student, but I still live in the Heights. I'm a recent grad. I think that a large part that we've discussed is sort of YU students getting opportunities, trying to go out downtown and trying to sort of intern and sort of the learning aspects. So I'll just start off. My story is that I graduated from YU and I didn't have a job out of college. So what I did was I created my own opportunity. I created my own website. I learned how to sort of design my own web page using like these Wix, Weebly pages. and it was a very successful. I thought it was very successful. I haven't checked it out in months. I have a job? No, because I have a job now. That website I was able to put on his resume. I'm the CEO of this company that I founded. I created my own opportunity. And in terms of learning, that I'm actually very involved with the administration in REITs about trying to get alumni back in the base midrash, either at 5 o'clock in the morning or till very late at night. So I just try to. I don't know how many people here are. I don't think people really know that, understand that. YU is trying to make an effort to try to get alumni back in the base, and there is this sort of this culture in YU that you don't have the opportunity, you make it yourself. So.
Well, thank you very, very much.
you.
Thank you, Sarah.